Okay, so for my project, I decided to do Steve Jobs because I really like Apple products. I own a lot of Apple products, but I also own PCs and stuff. The computer that's sitting in front of me is a PC. So I'm just going to go through and answer some of these questions that are on here. So the opportunity that he saw was this little computer that he'd been designing on paper, but he couldn't find the money for it. And he actually came up with a really good design while he was working for Hewlett Packard, because Hewlett Packard had computers that were pretty spendy, but not only that, people couldn't afford the monitors for them, and so he saw a opportunity to create something to where you could connect your computer to your television, from what I was reading, and so that just kind of started the whole project. But the Apple One turned out to be more like a hobby computer, kind of like nowadays how you build your own computer, where people would actually pay to have them build these little specialty computers or whatever. Okay, so the other thing, that reason that they did this is because when they were working for Hewlett Packard, there was a desktop computer called the 9830 that ran BASIC, and you could just sit down, run BASIC, and it was good to go, but it cost $10,000. So they figured, Steve Jobs and Wozniak, his partner, figured that they could make something more affordable that you could plug into your TV, and that was just a hobby computer. It had 8K, so 8 kilobytes of memory. 4 kilobytes took up BASIC, and then the other 4 kilobytes were for any of the basic programs that you designed. It was a hobbyist computer, is what they considered it at the time. And when they first did it, they got a local computer store that wanted to buy completely built computers. They ordered, from what Wozniak's saying, they ordered something like 100 units at $500 each to retail at $666. It was unbelievable, a $50,000 order, and they weren't expecting it at all. They were expecting like maybe 40 people to buy these, or 50 at like $40 each or something like that, in this little club that they had started. But then this computer store decided that they wanted them for more expensive, and that kind of got the ball rolling on and everything. Hewlett Packard decided that they didn't want anything to do with it, even though Wozniak and Steve Jobs were both working at Hewlett Packard at the time. They decided that they couldn't get into the market because the hobby computer was kind of a niche market that they were scared of, because they didn't think anybody was going to want a personal computer like that, especially at that cost back in 1976 or 75. When it first came out. Steve Jobs and Wozniak, they got the legal release to build their computers and sell them separate from Hewlett Packard. Yeah, that's kind of the basics on how Apple started. But I guess it started before that, though. Steve Jobs was saying that he had designed many computers and many basic programs on paper, but he never had the money to produce them. And so without investors or anything, they just kind of sat in his notebook, which I guess his notebook still existed up until his death, and he had designs for stuff that Apple hasn't even come out with yet, and they probably won't, because Steve Jobs was a lot of the reason why they were pushing for new things like the iPad and the iPhone and like all the stuff that they kind of had, that they released before everybody else. But he was kind of a crazy genius, and a lot of people, without him, his vision is kind of hard to see. So the next question is, describe why you think this is a valuable opportunity. I think that it was an amazing opportunity because of the fact that they saw that people were going to want home computers, because BASIC and stuff was difficult, but it was very interesting. Like when I was a kid, I tried to learn BASIC and it was super hard. Like it was like 10 pages of coding just to make a little triangle appear on the screen. But it was something that people were interested in because it was new, it was exciting, it was technology. Them jumping on it when they did to create the Apple computer and make the personal hobby computers like that was really, really good, because it was ahead of its time. Like they probably could have waited another 10 years and still been fine, but the fact that they got it out so early and so basic and were able to build off of it and get people interested, when they did, they didn't have to compete with Hewlett Packard. They didn't really have to compete with, because at that time they weren't into personal computers, they were into business computers and government computers and stuff like that. The solution, I don't quite know what that means, like briefly describe the solution for the opportunity, but basically how they made it happen was they ended up going and they had to order all the parts and talk to the part suppliers and get credit in order to build the computers, because they didn't have the money to build 100 computers, because they didn't expect an order that big. So they sold, Steve Jobs sold his van, Wozniak sold his like HP calculator or something, it said, and then they were able to apply for credit through their part suppliers, and it was a 30-day loan, so they had 30 days to pay it back. but they built the computers in like 10 days and were able to pay him back no problem. And then after that, they had a bunch of money banked to, keep building computers and make profit. And, as they say, it's history. Going back to like the discussion on what's better, Android or Apple, I think Apple definitely push the boundaries. They try to come out with new innovative ideas and stuff, and a lot of their technology is pretty impressive, but at the same time they are kind of behind on other things. But I think when it comes down to it, they were the ones that kind of came up with the ideas that gave other companies a chance to become what they have, because like Samsung and stuff wouldn't be where it is without Apple, most likely, because when the iPhone first came out, smartphones kind of based their technology off of Apple, but then given time, they started improving their own technology and coming out with amazing things and everything. But I think without Apple pushing those boundaries to figure out what was possible, I think that a lot of the stuff that we have nowadays, we either wouldn't have, or it would have taken longer for other companies to figure out, because other companies were staying comfortable in what they were making. Like some companies were including bigger screens with slide out keyboards, and then Apple kind of came up with the idea of why not a digital keyboard, so, but a lot of companies were like, well, people like physical keyboards, people like this. It kind of goes back to almost like the creation of the PlayStation. The PlayStation was originally a Nintendo project that was supposed to come out around the time the N64 came out, but Nintendo said, nah, people like cartridges, they're never going to get on board with CDs. And so Sony broke off and came out with the PlayStation when Nintendo came out with the N64. I kind of feel like that's what happened with Apple and Hewlett-Packard, is Hewlett-Packard wasn't quite ready to break that mold because they had a successful business, so why change it? And so I think with Steve Jobs taking the initiative or whatever, he made leaps and bounds in technology, starting with the Apple I computer, which was basic, which was even more simpler than DOS. And it was literally all text-based everything, but it was something that people were interested in, and he jumped on the opportunity before other people did. Hopefully that meets all the requirements. I'm going to get to editing this. I hope you enjoyed the video.